All right, so I'm just curious to hear from each of you before we get into some of the questions. How's everything going? How are your companies handling being fully virtual, I imagine now? Ben, Dave, have you guys had any bumps in the road?
It's been an interesting time for us as an MSP. We have hundreds of clients, and all of them are impacted in some way or another, and they rely on us for support. We're considered an essential service. Everybody needs their technology up and running right now. We're getting all sorts of requests for remote access solutions, collaboration solutions, things like that. People having technology problems. Fortunately, we're well set up to work remotely during this time and connect to machines remotely, do stuff like that. But I will say, doing things like on-site support, on-site projects and things, obviously that presents deployment challenges. So far, things have been all right, but it's definitely thrown us a curveball.
Yeah, Dave, how about you? How about your team moving online? Did you have any hiccups?
Yeah, I think we were really positioned, I think, to move quickly online. Of course, most of our services are not remote, but certainly not office-based, at least not our office-based. The fact that we have so many clients in so many different industries means that, quite frankly, how we're supporting our clients today really depends on where they are, their industry, and their situation. So we have clients that literally are unfortunately doing 10 to 20% of the revenue that they were doing before, and so that's had to impact the way we're serving them. We have other clients that are busier now than ever before in healthcare and some of our banking clients and grocery and whatnot. So we're really trying to be nimble to meet our needs. We've made a commitment to keep all of our people through this crisis, and we've also made a commitment even for our clients that can't pay us right now. We're still providing critical services to them so that we don't gap their support and their leadership at a time they need us the most, but may not be able to pay in the short term. So things are good. It's certainly unprecedented times we're all in.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised that we really didn't miss a beat going online. We've had several times in the history of Mindgrub when the building was under construction, we had concrete that encased our server closet, and we had to go online for a couple of weeks to rebuild it. And at that time, I think years ago, I said, forget desktops, everyone's on a laptop, because I knew we were going to be more consultative and traveling and getting on planes and stuff. So I think everybody's traveled for work at some point, and all their equipment, and if they had to VPN in. So that part was easy. To your point, Dave, we did have some clients that, depending on the industry, we have some in retail and entertainment, in casinos, and they were hit pretty hard. But a minor part of our business, and then in others, in healthcare, pharmaceuticals, government, soon to be education, we're noticing increased demand. So that kind of helped balance things out. But we think we're going to really change a lot of things because of this. I've been telling people that I think we have a big box office right now, and I would have naturally kept adding, 200 square feet per person, right? And we're about 130, 135 now, and our office is a big overhead expense. But at the same time, we started with a smaller Mind Pub, which is a co-working location. So now we're actually thinking about keeping a headquarters, but otherwise growing regionally by having Mind Pubs. And employees generally work from home, but when they need to work in person or have in-person meetings or meet with clients, they have a pub to go to, and it's all badged and everything. So we've thought about a lot that could change moving forward that we're excited about. Have either of you thought through some of the things maybe you've done now that are going to be evergreened, or is there anything that has changed for the better that you think will continue on?
Absolutely. I mean, we were already seeing in terms of an MSP, a big migration to using cloud and hosted services, getting away from the big server closets that used to exist, or whenever possible, the expensive data centers and server farms that exist out there. And certainly, I don't see that turning around anytime soon. I think people like taking their hands out of the physical hardware space, and that's made a big difference for us. I also think a lot of the idea of doing just meetings virtually in general, I think in the past, This is how I know I started in business. It was, if you can get in front of the person, if you can meet them, talk to them, shake their hand, that's what you do. That's how you get the meeting. But I feel like there's been a real embrace as we've moved forward, and once people actually stuck their toes in the water on these digital collaboration solutions like conferences, web chatting, video conferencing, collaborative editing, etc. I think once people dip their toe in, I feel like they're pretty much fully invested in it. And I'm doing more meetings virtually, I think, now than I did physically before the crisis started. So.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed a dynamic in our meetings. We were kind of ghosting our remote employees. We have a number of them now, everywhere from New Orleans to Texas and in the Carolinas. And they otherwise were kind of left out when we would have meetings in the office. Now we're all virtual. I'm seeing some of those employees for the first time and working with them on projects remotely. And I see all the positives in us all getting online finally, basically, and having transformed that last little part of the business, plus the sales process. Now we largely transformed our sales and business development online too, for a high touch B2B company. But beyond that, we think this is here to stay, and we're going to definitely embrace, more of this digital format. Dave, would you say, for CIOs and CTOs right now, I imagine they're battling the same things that we are as far as getting their workforce online. What do you see their major challenges that they're facing, that Hartman would come in and help with? What's the number one thing you're solving for your clients right now?
Well, actually, the first few weeks certainly was about reaction, capabilities, access, security, all the same things that we've been discussing. I do see now a big and rapid shift toward the future. So not only are they thinking about, what are we doing now that we can maintain, but how is our business evolving? How does it need to evolve? Thinking about supply chain changes, what's going to be available? What new channels do we need to introduce? What channels have gone away through this? We're seeing professional services firms, large clients of ours that are literally rethinking office staff and office makeup. And of course, that's going to impact the size of offices like you talked about, but really also the roles. I mean, we had a managing partner of a law firm talk to me the other day, how he is realizing for the first time that, and their lawyers are realizing, they're a lot more self-sufficient than they ever thought. And that's changing the way they're having to look at administrative staff and support services. And so I do think in a lot of those cases, this is going to change companies for the positive. We have other clients that they're looking at their supply chain and they're realizing that their customers probably won't come back, certainly in the short term, but in the long term. And so they're having to rethink, how do they get to market, new go-to-market strategies, more new channels for their products, certainly digitization of products and services. And then the final thing I think we're seeing a lot of is all companies really evaluating their workflows. When you take stock of how easy are you to work with, how easy are our internal processes, how easily is it for things to get done? Do we have things like e-signature and online digitized document and contract management, automated accounts payable and accounts receivable workflows? And the more companies are able to think about that and implement those kinds of business capabilities, the more nimble and flexible they'll be in this world and in the future. And of course, CIOs, CTOs play a huge role in the architecture of those capabilities.
Absolutely. I commonly talk about the turn of the century when in the 90s, in every kind of village or community, there was a travel agency, and you went in there and you showed up physically and they booked your plane tickets. Or you could go to the airport physically and buy plane tickets, right? But since that time, obviously the Travelocities of the world, that industry went online. Well, every time there's disruption, that was the 99, 2000 disruption with the .com companies. But Mindgrub started in 2002 after September 11th. We really got our boom period in 2008, 2009 when the iPhone came out and we started making mobile apps. Well, we also had a recession then, and we had to, at that point, figure out how can we be nimble and digital. And so we then weren't disrupted by this disruption, and we're trying to figure out where are opportunities for us. Because this is an interesting list. In the last time, 2008, 2009, I read this the other day. These are the companies that were founded in that time frame: Airbnb, Uber, WhatsApp, Groupon, Asana, GitHub, Slack, Stripe, Pinterest, Square, Venmo, and just in 2010, Instagram, right? So there's so much happening right now around this disruption. And that's the really interesting thing that I'm starting to see in our clients. And I'm not privy to, in both your cases, you're probably helping companies with their day-to-day operations of how to do digital transformation, and things as simple as like, contracts having electronic signatures and stuff. I take that for granted now at Mindgrub. That's just always been, part of. As soon as that technology came out, it just made sense and we went for it. But where do you think some of the disruption that you're seeing, that could be a lot of fun? I think the event space, obviously, I'm very curious to see what happens. We're making a go of it using Zoom, and I'm sure you've been in some Zoom breakout meetings, and some people are doing a pretty good job of facilitating some kind of collaboration online. But what other disruptions are you seeing that your clients should be on the lookout for?
I've seen a big one with commercial real estate, and you alluded to this a little bit earlier, Todd, when you were talking about how maybe we'll do things a little bit differently with remote spaces and mind pubs and things like that. And I've seen sort of an evolution since maybe the beginning of March at how this thing changed, which was at the beginning, it was this big ramp up talking about, how are we going to get people working remotely and just making sure people could work. And now then as the businesses have had to adjust to a new reality with revenue and stuff, they've had to adjust and say, well, how do we right size and trim the fat, et cetera, make sure we're doing things efficiently and effectively. And now we're on the other side of it. I think we're coming to the other side where it's more like, how does our technology and our workflow need to change to make the most business sense? And you brought up the idea of getting rid of these spaces. Well, in commercial real estate, what's to stop some of these organizations from saying, well, what if I could take, 5 figures out of my leasing expense per month, and I'm going to invest all of that into cloud infrastructure. All I'm going to do is invest in hosted technology instead of a leased space that I have to maintain and do all this other stuff with, and create a remote work staff that is highly technically capable. I think that is very dangerous in terms of the real estate space, because if people can work remotely and they don't need these big spaces and they can collaborate and the technology makes it so effective, these big buildings might end up empty.
Yeah, no.
I think.
Go ahead, Dave.
No, I was gonna say, look. I mean, there's no doubt that I think our nation, our business community, is going to embrace remote workforces and remote capabilities like never before. But there's also no doubt that when this is over, whenever that is, live meetings and workspaces will come back. Now, one of the challenges I think is going to be in the intermediate term. How do you do that hybrid situation? So you're going to have some events where people will be live and there will be remote connectivity as well. You'll have classroom environments where some students will be in the classroom and some won't. You'll have meetings and office environments where some will be in the conference room and some will be in the virtual conference room. And I think that's going to bring a whole nother challenge, because it's really not enough just to put someone on Zoom to make them feel engaged. They have to be feeling like they are living the experience. Otherwise, they're going to give up, or they're going to, tire of that situation very quickly. So I think, it was good enough to kind of get us all on Zoom a few weeks ago. Months from now, we're going to be a lot more innovative in the way we leverage these capabilities in order to really engage our people, and then to provide, like I said, that dual or that hybrid solution or scenario where we're dealing with both scenarios for some time to come, maybe forever.
Yeah. Right, absolutely. We have a telepresence robot at the office that you can check out, and you are way more present in a meeting when you can drive up to the table and sit there. and actually rotate your monitor toward people and like wave and get their attention. It's going to be a new era in inclusiveness and accessibility, right? I actually see the digital divide is that is a very interesting thing as people transform. I'm noticing there's those organizations that are kind of fully digital and those organizations that aren't fully digital. And then I see parts of our community too that have broadband, have devices, they're online learning. And there's parts of our community that they don't have broadband and they don't have the devices and they're currently not getting education and stuff. So I do worry about a digital divide. Have you guys thought more around, as Baltimore and as Baltimore City, what we need to be doing now as like putting our CIO and CTO hats on?
It's very difficult to say. I mean, there's the infrastructure challenges as it pertains to that stuff vary so locally. And I say locally, I mean down to the neighborhood. I mean, we're talking, you could walk blocks between areas that have fully lit up telephony services, internet services, and areas that are practically deserts for this stuff. Even new buildings that come up. I mean, I remember when you were having construction in your building, and even at that time, way back, Todd, there were challenges getting good broadband services and stuff, fiber getting lit up in that building. The other challenge with this, of course, is that companies like in Baltimore, Verizon or Comcast, they have to be willing to build out these infrastructures that actually support the stuff. And it's obviously during a time where people aren't really engaging all that much. There's been a lot of reluctance even to do some of this construction and build out. So it's going to be a long haul. I think we should definitely push for that need. I think people need to make more business cases for why it's necessary. Unfortunately, I think some of the more charitable reasons for doing it maybe aren't that effective. Maybe we need to put it in more economic terms so that people can grasp the necessity for this and why we need to make it an initiative as a society. But it's going to require a serious leadership from the telco companies to want to engage and push that part, because that's been a challenge up to this point.
Well, I think it's going to take, I'm sorry, I was going to say, it's going to take leadership within the city as well, that wants to bring those efforts together. There's a lot happening. And unfortunately, in some cases, there's a lot happening on different fronts. I'm not sure there's even coordination of efforts in every case. And that happens in every city, but it seems to be magnified in a city like Baltimore. But, look, every crisis, it tends to highlight those disadvantaged services, right? Whether it's healthcare, whether it's food deserts, whether it's technology capacity and access and capability, crises tend to highlight and magnify those deficiencies. And then it's a matter of what we're going to do about it. And hopefully, like you say, Ben, we do something about it and it sticks.
Yeah, absolutely. I have this concept I'd love to see the city implement, and that's really the grid, in that you ultimately just every service, you look at the grid and you map out where are we proficient and where are we inefficient in areas of the grid, and then you're just looking to basically normalize it all, and you set priority by the needs on which of those services. I look at internet, in my mind, I don't see it any different than water or septic or electrical. And ultimately the grid is there to support it. You can get whatever electric you want to pull at any corner of the city. You can get that electric there. You can certainly get water and septic too, but not internet, right? That needs to change.
I think in general, we need to have a culture shift about our thoughts about technology planning and assessment and such in general. I feel like technology by a lot of people is looked at as this luxury. It's like, well, we're going to make this investment in technology and it's going to be so great, but that's like a bonus. It's like the cherry on top. We're doing all these things and then we'll get to the technology and see how it makes things better. And I think now, especially as we're relying on it so much more than we had to in the past, I think the conversation has to be more like, hey, listen, the technology planning and the technology growth that we need to have happen in our businesses and society and schools, wherever, that has to be just a part of the conversation anyway. Like the same way we have those conversations about other core services. it needs to be seen on equal terms. I think sometimes people look at it as a little bit of an optional thing, but that's really no longer the case. I think the planning has to be really forthcoming moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Planning and execution. We have some planning at the highest level for the city, and then I think the execution is where we're a little challenged. But you know, there's hope. I'd love to see some 10-year planning, so it's never, you know, just for 1 or 2 political cycles. You know, we just think in decades, and we're here at 2020. So, you know, talking about planning, and there's this book. I don't know if you guys have read The Rockefeller Habits at all. But there's this concept of, you know, big, hairy, audacious goals, BHAGs. And I do like to set my 10-year BHAGs, and then we look at 5, 3, and 1 year. And then every year we do our initiatives. So we largely achieved a lot of what were our last decade goals. So we're just going through setting our new goals now. If you were thinking of a CIO or a CTO, what would you say over the next 10 years, you know, what should be their major goals?
Well, I think if I'm a CIO today, I think nimbleness has to be the defining strategy. And you know, these 3 months are as big an indicator of the need for that as anything. I think CIOs need to build flexibility, scalability, nimbleness into their strategies, because one, business changes typically faster than not necessarily technology capability, but IT staff capability to change. And so I think CIOs need to build those nimble and flexible structures into their planning going forward, because that's going to allow their business to be able to pivot when necessary. I also think that that CIOs and CTOs need to, even more than they have been over the last 5 years, open up the kimono. I think I believe that as that digital divide lessens, and as more and more of the workforce are digital natives and comfortable with digital technology and capability, I think IT leaders more and more will have the responsibility of being able to communicate as equals with their business partners. The days of the IT person having knowledge and kind of keeping their arms around everything IT, and if you needed something, you come to that person, those days are gone. And they're going to be more and more irrelevant as time goes on. So I think the smart CIO is the one that opens up the kimono and says, look, this is a portfolio, this is an investment capability for our company. How do we collaborate to create capability and capacity for our customers, for our firm, you know, for our customers' customers?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's the agility, it's the, you know, the scalability too. That's the other piece of it. Is I think businesses need to be agile to be able to kind of mix and match, but then as they figure out where their operations are successful, to be able to scale that, and to scale it up and scale it down as far as how agile they're going to be too. At that point, though, you wonder, do all businesses become the Uber of that business? You know, meaning that you can just use all fractional, you know, resource talent. It's all digital operations, you know, gig economy stuff. Like, can every business become that? Because that was, you know, physical space, like retail space, was a major differentiator in the experience of that physical space. And obviously that's not going anywhere, but for the, you know, vitality of these companies moving forward, they have to have a equally impressive, if not better, digital presence, right? So ultimately, do you see that that it is just going to be a matter of Uberizing businesses? How do you see companies can differentiate their brands digitally? It's a stumper, right?
I was going to let Ben go first.
Oh, okay.
Well, you've been going first.
We're doing
Happy to go.
is you can't. You have to figure out like what in the industry is working. So here's an analogy I have is that, you know, our parents' generation watched Walter Cronkite, and that's where they got their information. right? He was the subject matter expert on the news of the day. And then, the boomers and Gen Xers shifted more to getting their news online. And Gen Xers in particular started to shift way more online than TV. Millennials entirely online, maybe a little TV, but moving away from traditional news sources online. The Gen Zs are getting all their news from influencers and generally not mainstream news media at all. So the way that I'm seeing is that to some degree, we all need to become like an influencer online,
Right.
and be able to kind of, as a brand, pivot it that way. So, so for a lot of the companies that we work with, that's entirely what we're seeing is how do we get them, or at least part of their business, to be a really strong online brand, and their differentiator at that point is really their people and their subject matter expertise and their communication strategies and stuff. And operationally, if they can get better, quality service, but at that point, everything's almost back office to everyone, right? If we're not meeting physically. So you really do have to look at efficiency of operations and IT, and then differentiate on your brand and your culture. But it really escalated the need to do all of that.
No doubt, no doubt. Well, I'll say this, Todd. So certainly as digital strategy, as business gets more and more complex and the integration of business models become more and more complex, certainly in-house knowledge and subject matter expertise will always be important. But like Steve Case, who was the founder of AOL, proudly a client of ours since 2005, said in his recent book, every company has smart people in their companies, but the smart CEOs realize that they also have more smart people not in their companies. In other words, how do you open up that kimono? How do you open up your network to the knowledge and the expertise and the experience that's outside your company? And how do you integrate that back into your firm's knowledge and your firm's growth and adaptability? And I think that's, as a company, that's what we play on, right? We don't necessarily want to come in as the expert. We don't want to come necessarily and outsource the talent that's in our client companies. We want to co-source. We want to partner with our clients in order to be additive to their capabilities. We want to supplement their capabilities with our own to be able to push the agenda of the client forward. And so whether that means as an outsource or co-source CIO, or whether that means partnering up in various subject matter expert type scenarios, we really think that companies like ours, and you see it all the time in outsourced CMO, marketing areas, chief operations officers now being outsourced, certainly outsourced CFOs. And these are all situations where talent and experience is collaborative with the in-house talent in a company, and I think making them even better.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a lot of times where, we end up working together, is where you are doing the advisory services, and then a DP or a Mindgrub, we're a little more of, the doers that then go build the software out or do the systems integration, right? And, but even companies like ourselves, we're absolutely figuring out how can we have a virtual workforce ourselves.
Yeah.
And then you think about, what's our differentiator with that virtual workforce? How are we different than, let's say some overseas team? And it's very much our ability to collaborate online. I think, Ben, you said it earlier, it was actually a really good word you used, and you said collaborative sessions or something, or
yeah, I mean, so what I was going to say in general is what we probably should be doing more of is use this time as kind of a market research kind of opportunity. I mean, think about who your clients are. And I know we've had to think about this a little bit at DP Solutions as we've done more, videos and posts and things and communications, blogs, et cetera, to try and communicate messages and position ourselves. But that wasn't by accident. I think a lot of it is actually going to the people in your market, your clients, and saying, hey, how's business right now? What is life like right now for you? You did this at the beginning of the call, Todd, where you asked us all, what's it been like to operate right now? I'm not sure we all really even know where we are going to need to be as a brand or as a business 2-3 months from now. It's really going to depend a lot of where our market is And I think when we do that kind of research and we ask those good questions to our clients, how are things going? Just a very straightforward talk, we'll know how we need to adjust things to be able to still be able to serve that market, or if that market even is still working for us as a company. But I think that's really critical, just to reach out to your clients, and your trusted clients will want to talk with you about this stuff, especially right now.
Well, you're absolutely right. And I think that now more than ever, there's an opportunity. And of course, it varies by industry. But for a lot of companies today, because of some of the federal loan and grant programs, they have full teams of employees, or at least partial teams of employees. Business as they knew it before is down, and they have a captive audience. They're all sitting at home looking for activity. There are some companies that are actually engaging us and, of course, themselves in business process improvement, training. How do we improve that business software system that we've always said we only get 10 or 20% utilization out of? Is this the time to re-engineer client processes, to automate, to bring automation and digitalization? So it is an unprecedented time. These are all, as we always say, business initiatives. They're not technology initiatives, and they need the collaboration of business leaders to be successful. And so this is a great opportunity. As someone I know said last week, every crisis is also an opportunity. And I think smart leaders are using this time as an opportunity to make their companies better in the future.
You're absolutely right. We're noticing a good analogy in the restaurant industry. Those restaurants that traditionally were all kind of front of the house and lots of tables and dine-in service are now, to stay alive, they had to go 180. It's all pick up or take out. It's all digital transaction. They're trying to figure out how to get away from Grubhub and own their customer and have their own application, to do the e-commerce and the CRM functionality. But then even now that they're not using the restaurant part of it, rethinking that. And there's a lot of construction going on. I'm really curious to see, when we come out of this, what some restaurants have done to address the fact that people are going to be not meeting in as many dense numbers as before. The beer gardens of the world, have they put barrels to separate people every 6 feet? It's going to be interesting what kind of happens in the physical world. But those restaurants have actually retooled from having storefronts to now having to go digital and doing online transactions. I think you're absolutely right. Now companies need to be investing the same thing. If parts of their business aren't transformed, now is the time to do that digital transformation while there's disruption, because there is no time like the present when it comes to that.